Hello everybody and welcome back to another video on my channel. My name's Kevin and I'm a miniaturist living in New England and this is Minis by Kev. Trying out new intros, you know how it is. In this week's video, I really wanted to make something that reminded me of when I was younger. I feel like when I'm 32 and when I feel like when I was younger, it was popular to make jokes about missed connections on Craigslist. I don't even know if it's still a thing. I don't know how many people used it, how many people met people on it, but I feel like there was jokes about it all the time. And I remember just thinking, I think Craigslist, I don't know if it's still around. I think it's still around, like the website, but I don't know what parts of it. I was just thinking, like, what if that didn't exist and people had to do missed connections in real life? I don't know how to explain this. It just popped into my head. And I was like, what if people just had to use like a community board and put a picture of themselves and like put their misconnection out in public for everyone to see. And on top of that, I wanted to do something that's slightly Valentine's Day related because this video is going up on Valentine's Day, and so it's a kind of Valentine's Day related. So that's where this idea bloomed from. I know it's a really weird one this week. You know, sometimes ideas pop into your head and you just have to make them to get them out of your head, and that is honestly just what happened this week. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the camera around and we're gonna go ahead and make a misconnections for all those lonely hearts out there. I started off this project by measuring out the exact size that I wanted. I kind of roughly estimated based on real community boards / cork boards I had looked up online and measured it out. It's a little smaller actually. I know it's gonna look big in the end, but it's a little smaller than like a traditional community board, but I measured them out and then I cut them out. And then I got this cool little board here. The next step in making this was grabbing a snack, not sponsored, but hey, if you want to sponsor me, please. I then grabbed entirely too many popsicle sticks. Look, I did not need this many, but in the end, I actually do. You don't need this many to do this if you do it correctly. I just did it incorrectly. I measured incorrectly at first. So if you're doing this, you know, just be better at cutting than I am. I fixed these miter shears as I discussed in my last video. They aren't the best cutters still because the blade is really wonky and it does kind of shatter the wood still a little bit, but hey, it cuts enough. If you have extra popsicle sticks, it doesn't matter if it ruins it a little bit. While you watch me struggle to make this frame for the bulletin board, I just want to talk a little bit about why I'm making this. And to be honest, I've thought a lot about it, and I don't really know why this popped into my head. I just thought it would be interesting to make. I genuinely don't know how I came up with the idea of a missed connections in real life. I don't know. I'm at a loss for words here. I'm at a loss for thoughts. But what I will say is my original thought for this was actually to go a little like kind of cutesy and just like lighthearted and have people do missed connections on a board. And in the end, when it came time later, as you'll see, to start aging it a little bit, I just wanted to age it a little bit to make it look like it had been sitting outside because, you know, the papers that sit outside are not perfect. They'll get weathered and splashed on and dirt. And as I started doing that process, I just kind of, you know when you get in the zone when you're crafting and you don't really know what you're doing, that's kind of where I went. So you'll see later that this, I feel like in the end, is not as cutesy as I wanted, and it's more sad and dark and lonely. But you know what? That's okay. Sometimes our miniatures get away from us, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And we just roll with the punches and see what happens. While waiting on the frame to dry, I wanted to make this mat board look more like cork, and I had a feeling that a majority of this would be covered up. It really didn't matter what it looked like, probably, but just in case there was some peeking through, I wanted to give it some texture. And so I took this rock that I have inside one of my plants, I washed it and dried it, and then I just kind of rolled it all over. And as you can see, it does work, and I think that had I been making a bulletin board / cork board that you could see the back, I would use this technique again. I think that this was probably a waste for this exact project, but this does work. It does give you some texture. When trying to mix a color for the cork board, I noticed that there's lots of different shades of brown that cork can be. There is a golden brown, there is a darker brown, there's even some painted ones which I was going to stay away from, but I figured it didn't really matter what brown I used as long as it wasn't too dark, because again, it comes in a variety of colors. Also, does this really matter in the end because you can't really see the cork? Probably not. You can see bits and pieces poking through, which really is the reason why I wanted to do the cork in the first place, to actually paint it and make sure. Again, was this wasted? I don't know. I know that some people who do like collaging say that even if a background is completely covered, it's about the process and the layering and the techniques that go into the art that matter. And so when I'm doing something miniature that I know is going to be completely covered up, I try to tell myself that it isn't necessarily about the fact that no one's seeing that. It's the layering. It's the different steps that go into it that make it what it is. After that base coat was dry, I decided to go in with some dry brushing, which my forever enemy. Dry brushing is just for my forever enemy. I don't know what it is. I feel like it comes and goes. My skills with it are really hit or miss. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes I look like a toddler trying to do art with their fingers. I do not understand. You know what I should do? I should take a class on dry brushing, dry brush aging, because I really think it could help me out here. I don't understand it. I feel like I wipe most of it off like you're supposed to with a dry brush, and then when you go to use it, no color comes off, and I'm just like, what is happening? Am I losing my mind? Are the people that are dry brushing lying to me? I don't get it. I've had people try and help me. I think I just need to take a class on this. Anyway, rant over. Again, this is probably not something you will see except for in tiny little glimpses on this board, but it goes back to the layering thing, that the layers are what build up the artwork. And so if something gets covered, that's fine. It was there for a reason, for a purpose, and it is adding to the overall thing, whether or not you're seeing it. I dry brushed, I stippled as best as my ability, knowing that if I messed up any pieces, I could 100% cover it up with a poster. While that was drying, I went ahead and painted this frame black, which I was on the fence about. I wasn't sure if I wanted it to be black or silver. And in the end, I saw a lot of like public community boards on Google that were black, so I just went ahead and went with black. Once the layers were done and dry, I went ahead and put on a layer of Mod Podge, so that way it would just go ahead and be a little bit shiny. I think I have semi-matte, semi-gloss. It's not the shiniest one, but it's one of the ones below that. And I did that so that way it would look more like, not so flat. I needed to have a little bit of shine. Even though I do end up weathering it with dry brushing, it does end up helping a little bit. It gives it layers. It gives it details. I'm all about the layers in this video. For the actual Misconnections posters, I went to Canva, found a template. I found a website that does free stock photos, and I just grabbed a bunch of like pictures of individuals and threw them on the poster. And then I kind of came up with a story for each one. They're all very simple. They're very easy misconnections, and you probably won't be able to read them only because the text is super tiny, and my printer made it a little illegible. I can read it because I know what it says, but other people probably would not be able to. However, in the end product, you definitely can't read them because, as you can see here, I wanted to age these. So I didn't want them all to look brand new. I wanted them to look, some of them at least, to like they had been sitting out there for a while, that they weren't just a bunch of people slapping them up. And I think this is where it started to go from my cutesy idea to a sad, kind of lonely idea, because as soon as I started aging these, they started to look just kind of sad. Like no one came to meet this person for the misconnection. No one got in contact with them. And over time, they just started to decay here up on this wall. And that's where the sadness came in. There are some other things besides the misconnections, like roommate wanted flyers, or babysitter needed flyers, or piano lessons, and little note cards where people left notes, but a majority of the ones that are on here are the misconnections. So next was cutting them out. But first, obviously, I had to glue down the frame before I did anything with the flyers. Weighed down by some books, of course. And then we went back to my old friend, dry brushing. Now, here's the thing. I will say, in dry brushing's defense, usually when I dry brush, or at least when I was first learning, I would just kind of willy-nilly do it wherever. I just thought like, okay, I'm dry brushing, and especially when it came to aging specifically, I would just kind of put it wherever. Now I'm learning that things don't just decay randomly. So what I was trying to do is make it look like the bottom of it maybe had water running down and it started to pool at the bottom. And that is really the technique I was working on to try and get better at in this, was how to age things and make them look more natural, in a natural decay rather than just random. And so here I am just dry brushing the bottom to make it look as if it's kind of like water that's running down, the dirt is collecting at the bottom and it's seeping, how it would in real life. In this clip, you can kind of see a failed part of this miniature that I didn't end up going with. I tried painting on community board, but I realized that my detail brushes are still somewhere in my storage unit. I don't know where, and all I had was regular paintbrushes. So when I tried to paint that, it didn't work out, and I kind of gave up really quickly, knowing that I was just going to cover it up with posters anyway. I thought it would just be one of those many layers I spoke of, and yeah, I gave up on that part. So if you see that going forward, just ignore it. It's going to get covered pretty quickly. So here comes the fun part. This is when I got to decide what was going to be layered where. I started off putting the really dirty ones on the bottom because I figured the longer they've been here, the dirtier they'll be. I also put in some base layer ones, is what I'm calling them, that I knew would be mostly covered up, but I kind of wanted a glimpse of towards the bottom. And I just kind of went with it. I thought, like, what would look good where? There are some Easter eggs in here. If you catch any of the Easter eggs while I'm hanging them up, you let me know. Do you see an Easter egg? Or there's a few. You let me know in the comments if you see one. But I don't really know what else to say. I was just layering these, and yeah, I layered and layered and layered, and I like how it ended up looking. I wanted to do more weathering here to make it look like, again, it had been sitting outside. Some of the things I decided to go with here, I wasn't a big fan. The yellow is the one that stands out the most to me. I don't think it looks like weathering. It looks like somebody threw yellow paint on it, which, I mean, fair. I did, and maybe somebody did in this miniature universe too, but I think if I were to do this again, I would pick more grayish, brownish, blackish colors. But you'll see in a second that I do something, I think, to tone down the yellow. Going back to what I said earlier about trying to get better at aging, I really thought about what this would look like if it had been out in the elements and, you know, maybe it had been rained on, maybe it had spilled something. And so I really wanted it to look like water had run down the sides and pooled at the bottom, because I felt like if this was out in the elements, if it was out in the rain, water runs down, right? So it would make sense that the water would start molding and decaying at the bottom. So what I did is I went in with a black color, and then I went in with a dark green and a lighter green, and I kind of layered them to try and get them to look maybe kind of like mold or just discolored paper. I think that I would maybe add something into it if I wanted to make mold in the future, maybe some kind of flocking or sand or something. But I think that you really, in this instance, I think you get across what I'm trying to do. At least I hope you get what I'm trying to do. But to cover up the really obvious yellow parts that I thought looked too much like I just splattered craft paint on them, I just put a little bit of green over the top of those and a little bit of the dark green in hopes that maybe it would just look like some kind of weird mold. And I think that it does tone it down a little bit, even if it doesn't completely get rid of the yellow. So in the end, I think it turned out okay. I think it looks old and moldy and sad, which wasn't my initial plan, but again, miniatures run away from us sometimes. That's it. Sit back and relax, and here's my little thing showing it off. So that's our misconnection board. Going into this, it was supposed to be lighter. It was supposed to be fun and cute and Valentine's Day. I mean, it was never going to be like red and hearts and cupids, but it wasn't meant to be sad. And I feel like there's a certain sadness to this. The ones that are here rotting at the bottom, there is, you know, ones that have been pasted over. It gives off kind of a sad vibe, a sad feeling that I wasn't actually planning on doing when I went in to start this, but I'm not upset with it. It's just not necessarily what I'd planned. That's okay. Sometimes when we start miniatures, we have to follow the path that it takes for us and just see where it goes. So maybe there's like a little bit of commentary here about the fact that there are missing people posters and little baby posters, and we're more concerned about finding love than we are about other things. I don't know. If you want to think deeper about this miniature, you can take it at face value. I don't know what I'm gonna do with this though. I thought about originally making another brick wall in a new way, because if you watched last week's video, I was trying to make brick walls for my pop culture dollhouse in the future, and I thought about maybe trying a different technique this week, but I didn't have any of the stuff to make it. I don't know, maybe in the future I'll put this on like a brick wall and a shadow box. Maybe I'll just like find some kind of dollhouse to incorporate it into in the future, or a diorama. I mean, this could go in like a central, like downtown-y area of a diorama. I don't know what I'm gonna do with this. If you have any ideas, let me know, because as of right now, it's just gonna hang out to my shelf with everything else I'm making lately. Overall though, I like it. I think it turned out good. There are things I can improve on, but again, as I mentioned in last week's video, is that when I want to try a technique that I know I'm going to use in a bigger diorama or a bigger dollhouse, I do it here first in a smaller miniature or shadow box. That way I can practice it. In this one, I'm still learning how to do dry brushing. There wasn't a lot of dry brushing in this one, but that is something that I struggle with. I've talked about it many times before. And the other thing is this kind of like rotting technique I was trying to do here at the bottom. I don't know how well you can see it before, but where it's kind of like layers of black and green to look like just like rotting paper. This is a technique I really wanted to try because, well, I don't want to tell you because that would be a spoiler for a future video, but it's something I wanted to try, is doing aging techniques, and specifically rotting aging techniques. I think if I were to do this again, I would maybe incorporate a little bit of sand in there to make it look more like textured and moldy, but that's that. Can't go back now. Overall, I'm happy with it. If you can think of what I can do with this in the meantime though, comment below, let me know. And here it is. That's it for this week. So if you like me or you like miniatures, make sure you hit that subscribe button below, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.